Alright, so this week what we're going to do for the lab is you are going to sculpt a new head. So we'll sculpt the head in this video, and in the next video you will retopologize it and attach it to the body. Okay, so it just allows for a little more flexibility. It's another way of working. So basically you think about the form and the aesthetics first, and then afterwards you worry about the actual geometry. The way we've been modeling before has been more of the box modeling, primitive modeling way, where we have to like extrude and cut edges, and it's very CAD-like, so like it's mechanical. This will be much more organic, and for those of you that are a little bit more artistic, this might be an area where you're going to feel a little more comfortable. In the industry, depending on what industry you're talking about, this is honestly how they would model characters. They wouldn't use this program that we're going to use. They would use this, but like a level above. But they would sculpt it, and then afterwards they would retopologize it. Okay, and they'll have various tools and stuff. Okay, where did this come from? Go away. Okay. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna use this program. It's called Zbrush Core Mini. Basically, Zbrush Pixelogic makes Zbrush, and that's their main program. That's like a big. It's what they use to model all of like the really cool stuff, like dinosaurs and Jurassic World, or Hulk and Avengers, or even like the Elsa from Frozen 2. Basically, it's a sculpting software, but it allows you to make models and such. It doesn't do anything other than that. That's all it does. That and texturing, the painting. But that's all it does. That's like its thing. It does little other things, but that's pretty much its main thing. So we're going to use this. This is kind of like a lower free version of it, just to kind of get your feet wet, if you will. Feet wet? That ain't it. But you know what I'm saying. So we're going to use that. We're just going to sculpt in here, and, that'll be good. Now, if you have a tablet, I'm going to use this. You can use a mouse if you want, but I'm going to use my tablet here. I highly suggest it because it is pressure sensitive, and if you're used to drawing and stuff, you'll have an easier time. Okay? So let's get to it. All right. So, this is the program here. I don't want to get into a bunch of things with its interface because it's honestly really simple. Basically, our brushes are over here. These are the things that we can do. We have this model here. You can click on these and it'll make it different colors, and then you can change the color here as well. I suggest generally keeping it probably in basic. And the reason why is that if you look at all of these, that's the least good looking one. If it looks good with a bad material, it'll look great with a great material. You know what I mean? So I suggest using that just because it'll actually give you the most information. So even though the other ones might look cooler, and if you want to click on it now and then just be like, ooh, that's fine, but I generally suggest using that. Okay, so that's what this is over here. Up on the top, basically we have symmetry on, which is what we're going to want because we're making a face that's going to be symmetrical. This is the size of the brush. This is the strength of the brush. So we're going to, like if you're sculpting, it's going to push in and out that amount. This will basically won't raise. It'll lower the poly count on the model. You'll see kind of what that means in a second. And then this will export. You can export an image. It has this weird image thing. We'll talk about that later. And it will also export out for 3D printing. Now, we're not going to 3D print, but when it exports it out, it gives you a couple options, and one of them, I think it's a couple, but at least I know the one that I know, it will export out in OBJ, which is just a generic modeling format, so we can actually bring that into Maya. So we're going to be using that to export. And then over here are things for basically navigation. So if you want to turn perspective on and off, so what that means is whether it has a vanishing point for shortening, how you want to rotate, leave on a rotate y-axis. It'll be more natural. It'll be like what you're used to inside of Maya. Don't worry about that one. This is if you want the floor. So if you look, you can see there's a floor here. Basically, it's like turning the grid on and off. And you can change it too, so to X and Z. Frame, you can just also, if you go off, you can hit F just like you do inside of Maya, but you can also click that button. These do the same thing as holding Alt and clicking and dragging. Okay, they're the navigation, so you can do it here. And then this will show you the wireframe. Okay, so that's what that is. Yay! It's also Shift F is the hotkey. So some of the hotkeys are basically the same as in ZBrush, so this is kind of a good tool to get into that. Some of the other classes I actually teach ZBrush, which is much more advanced than this, like a lot more. But this is a good starter, and I think it's good for you to kind of learn on. All right. What makes this special, the reason why this is interesting, is this. I'm going to show you. So this is what it looks like, and you'll notice that it's not great topology, right? It's just kind of random squares just, thrown about. So normally, if I were to sculpt on this, I can only go so far until it would kind of loose out. But watch this. If I grab this, if I sculpt on this, it will automatically subdivide the model to support whatever it is I'm doing. So it makes the geometry, it dynamically tessellates the model in order to support what I'm sculpting. So what I can do is I can just sculpt and not have to think about like, oh, what's it going to look like? Like, what's the wireframe? Like, is the wireframe going to support what I'm trying to do? I don't have to think about that. I can just sculpt, especially if you actually turn off the wireframe, right? So that's its whole thing, right? I think they call it like Sculptress Pro or something. I can't remember what they call it now, but it's basically Dynamesh. That's kind of a generic term, although I think they also coined that. Anyway, so that's what we're looking at. All right. So I'm going to click on this to make a new sphere. Would you like to save changes? No. Okay, so we have this blank sphere. If you look up here, you can see this little head, and that represents where the perspective is, okay? So this navigation is not the same as Maya's. It's not going to be alt, left, middle. I don't think so. No. So the way it works is this. If you want to rotate the camera, you don't hit alt, you just click and drag, and that rotates, okay? Just so you can see that it's rotating, okay? That rotates. If you want to pan, move the camera, you hold alt, and you click out here, not on the model, and that will move it left and right, okay? Now, if you want to zoom in, it's alt, click like you're going to pan, let go of alt, and keep dragging. But don't stop clicking, basically. Don't stop holding down the mouse. That's how you zoom in and out. I think they got rid of the wheel. Yeah, you used to be able to scroll wheel not in Zbrush, but in Sculptress. In some ways I like Sculptress better than this one, actually. But this runs a little smoother, so I think we're going to use this. Okay, so that's how you move. I would suggest just moving around, get an idea of how it works. Hold Alt and click to rotate, Alt and click to pan, and then Alt, click, and drag, but let go of Alt and keep dragging, and you will zoom in and out. Okay, so you want to get used to that first. Now, if you're trying to get to specific views, the nice thing is they have this little head here, so it lets you know what view you're in. But if you're trying to get like a perfect side view, you can go to side, let's say like this side, and then I just hold Shift. I start clicking and dragging and hold Shift, and it will snap. See that? It'll snap to that view. If I want to the top, I hold Shift. Boom. Right? If I hold it down, you can see it'll snap. So if you need to snap to a view, you can do that. You can also click on these. They will actually also work, which is, I guess, nice. So that makes it a little bit easier to work with. So just be aware. Look up here at this dude's face, so you realize like that you're not modeling like the face down like this or up there. So you're making it correct. Okay, that's the navigation. All right, we're just gonna play around with it. I think what we're gonna do is just play around with it in this video, and then the next one I'll actually start sculpting. Okay. So that's navigation. That's that. All right. So then over here, this is actually a very simple program. Over here we have the brushes, and so standard basically when you draw on the surface. Does this have? Oh, they don't support masking. I thought it would. Hang on a second. Why is that? Shift up. Oh, control makes it so it doesn't. Oh, that's weird. Okay, sorry. I'm kind of this. I used to use a different one. This one's a little bit different. Okay, so so basically you can draw with it, right? So you sculpt, you draw with it. If you hold Alt, it will do the opposite of the tool. So in this case, this is doing addition, right? It's applying on top of the surface. If I hold Alt and draw, it'll go inwards instead, so it'll take away. Okay, so that's the modifier. Okay, so you can draw. Alt, draw in, and then most of the time after you do a stroke, especially if you're using a mouse because there's no pressure sensitivity, you want to hold Shift. Shift is smooth. What that will do basically is try to soften. See how that's softening? The do they even have? They don't even have to move over there. So that will basically soften what you're doing. Okay, so that's smooth, and then apparently they don't support masking, which is pretty lame. Okay. That's all the modifiers. All right. So that's that tool. Clay Buildup is the same thing basically as standard. What we're going to see is it draws strips of clay instead, which you might be like, that's kind of a weird thing. But believe it or not, most people, when they do this sort of sculpting, so like the professionals, and myself, prefer this. Now you might be like, oh, it doesn't look real good. It gives you a nicer, stronger edge. Like aesthetically, it's actually nicer. I don't know if you've ever seen like an actual clay sculpture. You'll notice it's like there's like smudges of clay on it until they smooth it out, and then afterwards you can just hold shift and smooth it, and then boom, it's right back where you want it. But it's a little bit easier to like visually see what you're making. So that's what clay buildup is. It's the same thing as standard, but inflate is kind of like standard as well, but it will kind of expand. You know, like if you're trying to make muscles and stuff that kind of puff, it'll do that. I don't really use it that much. Pinch does what the name suggests. You draw in an area and it will squeeze it together. Don't use that one too much. Move I use a lot. So move basically would allow you to do. So to change the brush size, like I said, you can go up there, or if you hold S, click and drag, you can make the brush bigger, and then U is the intensity. Okay. So basically it'll allow me to grab and basically, you know, move pieces around. Okay. So that's what move does, and then afterwards you can just, again, smooth it. This is running kind of crappy still. Okay. So that's move. Nothing too special there. Snake hook is kind of like move, but what it does is that, well, move just pulled the geometry. Snake hook will actually create more geometry as it goes along. So let me back this thing up here. So watch. Woo! Okay. You know, oof, that did not. Anyway. So in some ways this is good. It's kind of like move, but it'll actually tessellate. Slash is basically kind of, let me turn this off, you don't need that. Slash is basically, keep on it, hold the space bar. It'll draw like basically a strong line. It's kind of like a crease, okay? So it's like a cut. And then polish does what the name suggests. It's kind of like a stronger version of smooth. So let's make this a little bit bigger. I'm hit U for intensity, bring that up. It'll kind of like flat, it'll rub it down. But flatly. Smooth kind of rubs, you know, it's just, I don't know. If you look at it, you can try them both. You'll see what I'm saying. But sometimes you're trying to smooth something out and you can't quite get it where you want. Just switch to I'm holding shift. That's why it's doing smooth. Switch to this, and then you might be able to get it down even farther or get a better look out of the two. I think that is the tools. What I highly suggest is just kind of playing around with it, get a feel for it, and then you can kind of go from there. Let me show you what I would do, or what I do when I'm trying to like just make a character or something. So I'll do a new sphere. I don't want to save. What I'll do is I will turn to the side, go like this. Come on. All right. And I'm going to go ahead and use the move. Okay. And this. And I will like grab a basic kind of, you know, let's just do like a basic, I don't know, like a dog or something. Okay, so we'll do something like that. I'm going to hold shift to kind of, smooth that out a little bit. All right. Then what I'll do is I'll use the standard. I'll hold S to make it a little bit smaller, and I'll draw a nublet, right? Draw a nublet. Draw a nublet. I don't really know what I'm making. Draw a nublet like that. Then again, now I'm going to use the snake hook, and I will hold S to make it a little bit bigger, and a little bit bigger than that, and I'm going to grab it, and then we can kind of smooth that out after. Now it's got a tail, and I'm going to grab this nublet, and I can kind of pull that this way. It's going to smooth it. Smooth afterwards. Maybe pull this way a little. Go ahead and use standard. Just feels like it needs a little more meat on its bones, if you will. Go back to snake hook, and then I'll just kind of make this. Oops, that was not what I was trying to do. A little bit smaller, and pull it this way. Right, and then pull it down this way. Just smooth that out. Right. I did a bad job. Move. Okay. Smooth it, pull it. Okay. Let's go back to the standard. This is losing quite a bit of geometry, so let's make sure it's got enough to work with here. Oof. Let's unsmooth that a little bit so I can put some more back into it, some more meat on its bones. Okay. Good. But basically I would just do something like that and just try to, you know, work on it. And then I would just do the front leg kind of similarly and do the head and stuff and sculpt it out. Okay. Using basically those various tools. All right. I'm going to call this video good. But just go ahead and doodle around, just do whatever. And then the next one, what I'm going to do is actually sculpt the head, and you can just follow along. But just make sure you're like semi-comfortable before we go and do that. All right.